Welcome to the second episode of No Dice, a podcast series talking about female gambling addiction and stories of recovery across Scotland. I'm the host of your series, Kat Cochrane, and having been in compulsive gambling recovery for nearly 4 years, I'll be sharing my own journey towards the goal of a gamble-free life. As a content warning, this episode does cover themes of addiction and gambling behaviour. In my first episode, Why Women Gamble is Different from Why Men Gamble, I wanted to lay the ground a little bit as to the female experience around the psychological, emotional and societal reasons why women become involved in harmful relationships with gambling and why these differ from men. In this episode, we'll delve further into an issue that still exists to this day, and that is shame, and why stigma still exists for female compulsive gamblers, and indeed women who are living with any addiction. Joining me as a guest on the episode to talk further about shame and stigma is Alessia Fazzone, Women's Development Worker within Gambling Harms and Homelessness at Simon Community Scotland. Welcome, Alessia. It's brilliant to have you share this episode, particularly around this specific topic. Now, you've been working as a women's development worker specifically in connection to gambling harm and homelessness for the past year. Can you share what your role entails in supporting women?
Yeah, so I have worked with the Connect Hub as a women's development worker for the past about solid year now. So I'll maybe just give a bit of information about what the hub is. So we are a female-only gendered space. We have it's twofold. We have a support space and community space, and we support women who are have had experience of or are at risk of homelessness. So we kind of do a lot of immediate emergency support, showers, washing facilities, food. We also have our community space, holistic activities, yoga, art, college. We do all of that. So within that, all of the staff have a bit of a speciality. So mine is gambling harms. So what I do is I provide essentially specialist gambling support to the women who present to the hub, where we operate on a drop-in basis. So any support or advice around their old gambling or around someone else's, and it's just a space that they can just exist and be. And part of my role as well of ensuring that the Connect Up team are confident in providing any support to women that come in. So it's not only just me that would be able to provide the support, it's every single staff member.
And personally, I can testify to receiving support from the team at the Connect Hub because last November I was in a situation of finding myself officially homeless. It was at the hub that I was given practical and legal advice that put me in a better footing going through the homeless system. That included living in a homeless hotel in Glasgow city centre and temporary accommodation for 6 months before securing a permanent flat this summer. But when I dropped in, the advice was so valuable because I was really blinkered and blinded by how the system works, and everybody knew exactly what I needed at that very moment, and it was so valuable, and I'll hold that as a memory as part of the process that I went through, and I'm sure I'm not the only woman who's appreciates the services that you provide.
And I think maybe why we were so prepared when we came in, because it's something that is happening more, and people who would never expect to find themselves experiencing homelessness. The system is so unbelievably complicated, and it happened, and then you find yourself in a situation like you did, and it's like, what am I supposed to do? Who do I phone? Am I supposed to phone somebody? It's as well as obviously what you're going through, what you're experiencing, you're worried about where am I gonna stay tonight, or where am I gonna stay in a week, or in a couple of weeks I'm gonna get chucked out. And then you've got this whole other thing to kind of consider. So that's, kind of at least what we're sort of here for. And
yeah, it's a lot of sections, like section this, section that, and those can be really, really vital to know, but also explaining them to perhaps women who are going through a lot of mental health issues or coming out of relationships or in relationship breakdowns and just being in the most stressful positions in their life potentially. Being told what a section isn't really going to sink in, but the way that you guys described and broke it all down, I was armed with knowledge when I left the hub that day, and it was over a period of a few days. But I remember there was that one day where I was like, okay, I can take on this system now. I've been given the the encouragement and the strength to do that. So it was just so valuable. And the thing as well is that you never know what's going to happen, because a few years before I was writing feature articles about homelessness, and then I found myself in that position. And if somebody had said to me a few years ago, Kat, you will be in that position as one of the women who needs support and needs to navigate all that after writing about it, I was so far removed. It was just another article for me, although I felt passionate about homelessness even then, but it was another article that my editor had gave me. So it was filed and then move on to the next project or whatever, the next article. But it's kind of stayed with me as to what women did experience, and then I was experiencing it myself, and it was like a round robin of, and you just don't know how life and the current world can affect you and all the experiences.
I'm so happy that you are now
yes,
all good in that specific sense, obviously in terms of your housing, and like you said, like, yes, we were there, but that it took you to keep pushing it, and you did everything, and like that's so much hard work from you as well. So yeah, I'm really glad it's all eventually kind of worked out.
Absolutely. Like the proof's in the pudding. I can testify the proof is in the pudding, because I was so much further forward days after I'd come into the Connect Hub to get all that advice and all that information. And I might have been kind of set back a little bit if I hadn't, or I might have been longer in the journey. So it definitely accelerated things for me. So I can completely testify, and I'm like your number one witness if I have to be. I'll stand up in court and say how Connect Hub does work, 100%. Now, every person's journey is different as to why gambling harm starts and how they recover from it. But do you see patterns around shame and stigma for women as they experience that, and kind of maybe each phase of that journey?
Yeah, I think in general, the biggest thing around shame and stigma is around their motherhood and with their children, and to do with the guilt and shame that they feel. I think when kind of like in the early stages, if we see women being kind of emotionally regulating and are isolated and have so many difficult responsibilities, escapism, movement, we see that so much. And you kind of have that, I think it's put on women, they have that, I should be able to handle this. If you're in charge of family, if you're in charge of, even just yourself, you have that, oh, I should be able to handle this. I think that we've always had to experience some type of adversity or pain, and just to put up with it and get on with it. And in the early stages, for sure, I think you have that expectation for so long when it's only a point of crisis where you then seek help. Not all women, but that's usually the point of crisis when that happens. And it's that internalization of this thing. So I think in the early stages, you tend to see that, and then the escalation and losing control. It's that cycle, I think, and self-blame. If you're responsible again for yourself, for your family, you see that so much. Whether women have had their children taken off them, fear of social services or the police, or waiting on their status for immigration, all of these things kind of all come into the play, and we see that like every single day with all the different intersections of gambling, mental health, substance use.
Yeah, I think when we gamble, it's just not spoken about and nobody learns from it. And it's this idea that like nobody is a winner, pardon the pun. When compulsive gambling kicks in, only the betting site and whoever is taking your money is the winner. Like nobody out there is having a conversation saying, I think I have a problem, because there's so much stigma and so much shame around it, and it's just doubly so for women. So everything that you said there, I can really kind of identify with. I mean, I'm not a mother, but there's so many things I can identify with. I don't have to be a mother in terms of shame and stigma,
absolutely.
It's like definitely like the women that I met in GA, they go into those rooms, not for a second are they not thinking about their kids. They're already thinking about, can they be there for an hour? Who's looking after the kids, And even when they're in support and in recovery, kids are never off their mind, sort of. But it's important that they're looking after themselves so they are in the right place, getting the help kind of thing. I know you work passionately in raising awareness around the connection between women's health and gambling. Why is it so important that we learn as much as possible about how the two issues correlate?
So I think the main thing is obviously our health impacts every single thing we do. So menopause and period and PCOS, all of these things are so under-researched, as is gambling. So it is something that's not talked about. Again, women suffer in silence, even with regards to our own health. What we know about the male reproductive system compared to what we know about the female reproductive system is absolutely minuscule. We basically know nothing about it. And it's essential to developing essential supports for women in gambling, because there's so many different intersections that our health affects, specifically things like our hormones affect our mental health, our physical health. Different rises can have an impact on things like our gambling behaviour or addiction in general. It's something that's just really scratching the surface. There's like a lack of access to menopause treatment, or with our periods, or with sort of longer term reproductive health. So we go to self-medication, alcohol, gambling, all of these things. So in order to manage these symptoms, it's crucial to understanding how gambling plays a role in that, because it's an addiction, and they're showing that both sides in terms of like gambling research and awareness.
Absolutely. And as women, we're expected to do it all and fill the role of caregiver, worker, lover, etc., etc. And for a lot of women who feel the pressure of wearing all those hats, and often at the same time, gambling can be a bit of me time. The thing is, like, our mums and our grannies' generation went to the bingo, and that was their thing. And now the bingo hall or a casino is in your pocket. It's not just about going out on a Tuesday afternoon or a Friday night. So the two issues, gambling effects and behaviour and harm and health effects, are just correlating all during the day and overlapping in each other. For women who gamble on their phones, tablets and laptops, it's a very individual experience, as opposed to, say, a night out at the bingo or charity nights where there's tombolas and raffles. But I'm really keen to hear your opinion of how we can connect with women who are experiencing their own gambling harm or that of a loved one, but are struggling to reach out for support due to the idea of experiencing shame and stigma within like society's ideals of what a woman should be.
I would say that reaching out, I feel like, is the most difficult part. We can't expect women to come to us if we're not present within their lives as well. Like, partner with health services, I think, is really, really important. I think that partnering with health services, sexual health, GPs, maternity wards, mental health, everywhere, get our faces out there, get the information out there, engage with online platforms, engage in physical spaces, which I'll kind of go into a little bit more. People experiencing homelessness who are so like digitally excluded. And again, things like providing a bit of support. Like you said, these things don't just happen at whatever time at night. Like, these issues don't happen specifically between the hours of 9 and 5 either. So, and reflecting, I think it's so important to engage with like real lived experience.
It's reaching women, isn't it? It's like that can be the biggest challenge, because you are in a position where the Connect Hub and everything, the resources are there, but it's like, how do you get women through the door knowing that they're out there needing help? Like, how do you, in the name of the place itself is like Connect Hub, how do those connections happen when, like you say, people are doing harm to themselves through gambling or other addictions and so much isolation? How do you bridge that? And I think that was covered pretty well there. Thank you so much. But you spoke a little bit about the women being present that you connect with and acceptance. And I found that as soon as I came to terms with like my own idea of female stigma around gambling, batting down my own perceptions about what that was, I was able to heal so much quicker, because I was like, why am I allowing society to dictate my recovery or my idea of who I am as a woman or my idea of where I've been in my journey? And as soon as I was able to smash through those barriers, the healing journey can happen so much quickly, and especially with the right support around. So it can be like spinning plates sometimes a little bit when you enter recovery and getting the right support in place. But yeah, breaking those own internal barriers for women who are in that position is so important. It's easier said than done. Yeah, it's easier said than done, but I can testify that is something that really accelerated my journey. And it's a bit like, as soon as I hate that word survivor, but it's better than victim in those terms, because if you're a survivor of the gambling industry and its insidiousness, then it's better than being a victim to it, And as soon as I was able to switch my mentality around that a little bit, it was like a big stepping stone. And I always think if women can, or not just women, but anyone can get to that point of, no, I'm not going to be a victim to this addiction anymore, especially when you arm yourself with the knowledge of how the gambling industry holds so much power over us, even as non-gamblers. It's just all that advertising sinks in and is part of our baseline lives nowadays.
In addiction and homelessness, there's that sort of like big red X over no, bad, illegal. But with gambling, especially within like the UK, but like you don't have that, and like you said, it's normalised. And since doing this job, I now even kind of start thinking about my own like childhood and thinking about how gambling like played like a huge role in that. And it's just one of these things, because it is so normalised, and it's not just like saying that, it's so normalised.
Yep.
You cannot escape it. Even doing this job, it's wild how much research you do on gambling.
Yeah, I mean, you could easily be in, or someone could be in a support role and be triggered to gamble, because there's, even in the research, there might be parts of it that show how glamorous it is, or reading stories of big wins. And when you're learning like the harms, there's still that trigger, like, oh, like that big win, that big, because it's just like, it's there.
You kind of think as well, like, oh, it's a system. I can totally understand, because even when I started this job, I think I got like doing the lottery a little bit more, which is something I never even thought about, because it's constantly. And then you said, like, it's not all the bad stories. People don't just wake up one day and it's an escalation. So that's actually a really, really interesting point, actually.
It's like you'd almost need to keep yourself like strong and not susceptible to the fact that you're learning about it and you're researching, you're talking about it every day. It could quite easy. I'm not saying for you personally, but for people in support roles around gambling, they're like, oh yeah. I mean, you see the bad side, but you never know. It's like if you're having a bad day, a wee gamble might actually be just scratch an itch or something. I think it just shows we just all need to be vigilant, because this idea of gambling and advertising and the way that it's done being sort of like baseline normal, that is not normal. That's what we need to accept, and we need to be strong around that, no matter what side of the gambling control we're on, So debt, of course, is a massive element of stigma, especially around the spiral of borrowing, payday loans, manipulating and even stealing money just to feed compulsive gambling, because I know I've been there. And this spiral is known to lead to broken relationships, resorting to crime to pay for gambling habits, just to keep out of the spiraling debt, and often, ultimately, for many women, homelessness. Moses is a very effective self-exclusion tool. Particularly for me with Moses, that was one of the first things that I had to do as a self-exclusion, because going into bookmakers was kind of like my last bastion. I couldn't do it online, self-excluded from all the casinos in the UK. I really wasn't interested in those sort of like independent little arcade places. They just didn't float my gambling boat at the time, but definitely bookmakers. And it was peace of mind, and I'm still on Moses, and it does work, because as soon as I put that in place, I was like, I don't want to actually go through the embarrassment of being in a bookmakers full of men and then get a tap in the shoulder. It's a different kind of shame, but I can live with that, if that makes sense. So something I find really interesting, the Scottish Government has made a statement recognising gambling harm in the same category as drugs and alcohol when it comes to being a public health issue. And by definition, a public health issue is one that adversely affects individuals, families and the wider community. And yet Parliament's action on tackling the issue doesn't reflect that statement and falls way behind. So I was wondering, what role do you think research can take in understanding gambling harms for women? And do you believe that is a role that should be taken up seriously by policymakers and ultimately the government?
Absolutely. Like, it's a public health issue. Like, it literally is. And research is essential. It's not useful, it's essential to push for systematic change. And it's absolutely crucial. So one of the things that research reveals, and it has revealed some of the hidden harms, for example, that are missed by the mainstream narratives, especially like the complexities of women's gambling. So again, we've covered how often women gamble. I think that came to a big surprise of everybody, and that is increasing. Studies have shown that women's gambling is often linked to trauma, breakdown relationships, coercive control, all of these things. So I think having that sort of qualitative data, not just sort of like getting the numbers and stats, is like getting through the actual experiences of women and trying to get all of those complexities that women experience through their gambling. And also, like, research helps to tailor interventions that actually work for women. So again, exploring things like how shame and stigma uniquely affect women and help to create these more trauma-informed spaces that can reduce shame. And for these interventions, it can identify the type of support environments that work best for women. Again, we were kind of talking about like our support spaces that allow children. That's one of the big things that we see our space. We allow children in the space. We don't support them, but they're allowed to be in the space, so that kind of cuts down that barrier. So without the understanding, many services will fail to engage with the women that they're like trying to reach. How are we going to be able to change practice, policy and legislation? So yeah, without data, governments might underestimate the scale of the harm that it actually caused. Again, there's a growing body now that we're seeing, like people such as yourself and within the Syrian group, and you see it through Ayla, of lived experience, which is absolutely essential to creating these spaces. But policy is not near to catching up with that, and the policy needs to catch up with that. This is going to be cheaper for us in the long run. So yeah, early research backed interventions can prevent escalations into all of these things. And yeah, they're just not doing it.
Mm-hmm. It's like, even as politicians and not doctors, they can recognise that prevention is better than cure, like you say. You know, it's a kind of, absolutely, because we were recently, or a couple of months ago, was it, Parliament event ran through GamCare. And it was really interesting because the night before, MSP Claire Adamson, who I know does feel very passionate and genuinely passionate about talking about gambling harms and raising awareness. And we were both in the room there, and the debate had gone on the night before, and then there was the event the day after. And it was really interesting because as somebody with lived experience, one of the MSPs that was there came up and asked me, like, what can we do as politicians, as a body, as the government, what can we do? And I was kind of put on the spot, because I was like, right, how long have you got? You know what I mean? Like, I need to like have a camp bed in the corner and like be here with you for the next 2 weeks to dig that out. But it was interesting being in the space and being asked that question, because it was the first time where I was like, okay, there's some listening going on, because I know for a fact that 4 years ago there wasn't as much support services around, and but I feel like it's been the charities and it's been the support workers and it's been the third sector areas that have been doing all the carrying and all the heavy lifting. And it's really time for politicians to step up, and whether it be through, not just through chucking money at a problem, but through, like you say, the qualitative research, the data, putting that together, making sure that there's a plan that we can move forward to. It's 100% essential to take those next steps. So we always like to end each episode by highlighting that recovery from gambling harm is real. And no matter how long and how difficult the journey, and it can and does happen. So is there one piece of advice, Alessia, you'd like to share about gambling recovery from your own experiences of helping others?
Recovery looks so different from every person. And I can see why you would compare your journey, whatever that can mean to anybody, to other people. Everyone's always different stages. So it looks so different to everyone else. Please don't compare yourself to others, or where they are, or where you think they are. Because usually when you're seeing someone, you don't know what work they've done or how they're feeling inside their heads. And be kind to yourself, like the sort of idea of a relapse or whatever that means. It's all part of the process, and for yourself, and be kind to yourself. Like it's all part of the process.
I'd reiterate that, because myself, as soon as I started going to GA, after coming clean about my gambling, I thought, okay, this is me somehow cured, because I'm going to GA, and I've been through GA for 8 months, 6 weeks residential rehab, peer support, group support, and still have trips, slips and falls. I haven't since October 15th, 2024, so like 9 months down the line, but trips, slips and falls happen, and it's part of the recovery. Like you say, you'll find when it happens, you'll think it's not acceptable, I shouldn't be doing it, but it happens, and it's just about how you treat the next day and be kind to yourself, so it's so important. Thank you so much, Alessia, for sharing all your experiences and insights and helping towards breaking down shame and stigma for women, and when it comes to gambling, of course, in many aspects of life also. On the next episode, we'll be talking about gambling support for women and where to find it. Thank you so much for listening, and catch you next time on No Dice, a 12-episode series discussing female gambling addiction and women's recovery journeys across Scotland.